Hello and welcome to the LFS podcast with me, Kevin Ferris, and the final episode of the series. Coming up on this week's show, Jude Bellingham is unveiled as a new Real Madrid player after becoming the most expensive English player in history. Plus, outrage ensues as USA v Mexico is stopped after homophobic chants are heard coming from the stands. And this week, the Premier League released the fixtures for the 2023-24 season. I'll take you through all the key dates and ones to look out for ahead of next season. All of that and more to come on this week's LFS podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the LFS podcast, the final episode of this season, this series. It's been 13 weeks of incredible fun so far, rounding up the stories for you, chatting through some big topics throughout the season. It has been absolutely wonderful, and we have one more jam-packed episode to bring you before the season ends, plus some key information on what we have got to come on the LFS podcast in the future. But first, let's get to this week's news and a big story. Treble-winning Manchester City assistant coach Enzo Maresca is set to be appointed Leicester City manager after agreeing terms with the Foxes. The 43-year-old Italian could be named the new boss as early as today, reports BBC Radio Leicester. If so, it would come 6 days after City's Champions League success. He will replace interim boss Dean Smith, who oversaw just 2 wins from 8 games in a failed attempt to keep the Foxes in the Premier League. Smith took the job in April following Brendan Rodgers' dismissal after 4 years in charge. Maresca's move to the King Power Stadium would bring an end to a hugely successful year as part of Pep Guardiola's backroom team in what was his second stint as a coach at City, having previously worked as their under-23s boss. Well, that's an interesting story today. Of course, Manchester City's assistant coach going to the Championship, managing Leicester. It's a big job to get Leicester back into the Premier League, and that'll be expectation. Next season for Leicester in the 2023-24 season is to try and get back in the Premier League. That is the key for them. So a big job it will be for Enzo Maresca. Next, 4 players were sent off and the game was paused because of homophobic chants as the United States beat Mexico 3-0 in the CONCACAF Nations League semi-final. Chelsea's Christian Pulisic scored twice and Ricardo Pepi added a third for the US in the highly charged match. Mexico's Cesar Montes for kicking Arsenal's Folarin Balogun and Gerardo Arteaga was dismissed along with US duo Weston McKennie and Serginho Dest. The match was paused near the end because of homophobic chanting. Pulisic put his side 2-0 up in Las Vegas before Montes was dismissed in the 69th minute for a wild tackle on forward Balogun, who was making his US debut after switching allegiance from England. McKennie, who was on loan at Leeds United from Juventus last season, was sent off for his part in the scuffle. Pepe added a third for the US in the 78th minute, and both sides had another player red-carded when Arteaga and Dest were sent off following another mass brawl. Drinks were also thrown from the stands while fans were warned in stadium announcements that the game could be suspended because of the homophobic chanting. That ultimately became the case as the referee blew for full time with about half of the 12 minutes of scheduled added time still to play. Well, talk about an absolutely mental game of football. The USA beating Mexico 3-0, which is kind of the footballing story, is kind of irrelevant here, to be honest, because of this homophobic chanting, which I don't know the full details, although homophobic chanting in any way whatsoever is unacceptable in a game of football from anyone. Drinks being thrown from the stands as well is also an unacceptable thing to do. Just seemed a lot of madness going on in that game, and a game that had 4 red cards and the game was called off early. It seems like the referee could not wait to get out of there. Unbelievable. Moving on then. 2 charges, and Reading have been charged with failing to pay their players on time and in full on 3 occasions last season by the EFL. The charges relate to October, November and April's wage bills. Reading's owner, Young Dai, has also been charged with causing the club to be in breach of EFL regulations. The Royals were relegated to League One last season for the first time in 21 years, following their disappointing 2022-23 campaign. Reading and Dai have until 4 p.m. British Standard Time on Thursday the 29th of June to respond to the charges. And in our final news of the week's story, Joselu scored a late winner as Spain beat Italy to set up a Nations League final against Croatia on Sunday. Jeremy Pino won the ball off Italy legend Leonardo Bonucci outside his own box before firing in Spain's opener in Inshed, Netherlands. Ciro Immobile equalised for Italy with a penalty after Spain debutant Robin Lenormand handled in the box. Substitute Joselu pounced from close range after Rodri's deflected shot to send Spain to the Rotterdam final, which will be huge, by the way, for Spain. They were in the previous Nations League final against France and were beaten. So they'll look for revenge in a final in the Nations League and hope to lift the trophy for the first time since their World Cup victory in 2010. Now, to huge transfer news, and that is the title of the podcast. That is the thumbnail this week. England midfielder Jude Bellingham said he had goosebumps and his heart was close to stopping when he was told Real Madrid wanted to sign him. Incredible. Bellingham, 19, has joined the Spanish club from Borussia Dortmund for an initial €103 million. That's £88.5 million. The fee could reach €133.9 million, £115 million, with add-ons. When he was unveiled, Bellingham said this: "I'd always been aware of the interest from England, so that was pretty normal," said Bellingham at his presentation as a Real Madrid player. "It was a bit of a surprise when my dad sat me down and said, 'You've had a bit of interest from Real Madrid.' I think that was maybe about 12 to 15 months ago. When he said that I had goosebumps, my heart was close to stopping. It's something you don't expect growing up, being able to play for a team like this." Absolutely wonderful for Jude Bellingham. And, look, a player that truly, truly deserves to be at the top clubs in Europe, and Real Madrid are certainly one of the top clubs in the world at the moment, of course. And what a squad they're going to have into next season. They will be spicy going into the Champions League next season. Absolutely fantastic. And the La Liga as well. Absolutely wonderful for Real Madrid. And Jude Bellingham, 19 years of age. Incredible. The most expensive teenager, or one of the most expensive teenagers ever in history. Unbelievable. Right then, just before we move on to the Premier League fixtures for this week, and we're going to talk about all what is to do with the Premier League and what's to come for next season, key dates and things from the Premier League fixtures that were released this week, we have a statement from me, the channel admin here at LFS, and it has read, "This was announced last week. Now, as revealed in our new season promo, a new season on LFS will begin on Monday, 17th of July. This new season will include multiple changes and upgrades to LFS's coverage and content. Don't worry, it won't all change. Your current favourites aren't going anywhere, including this podcast, by the way. In the meantime, LFS will be taking a summer break from Wednesday the 21st of June until Sunday the 16th of July. During this time, there will be a significant decreasing of content produced on the channel. This is essential to ensure that when the season comes, we are fully charged, fully energised, and ready to hit the ground running. I would like to once again thank each and every one who has continued to support the channel throughout the season, and I'd like to share my sincere gratitude and appreciation. I hope that you can stay with LFS during the off-season. Finally, I would just like to say, see you on Monday the 17th of July, and have an amazing summer. And if you do not want to miss the brand new series of the LFS podcast, which isn't going absolutely anywhere, we have a brand new series starting this August here on LFS, just ahead of the new Premier League season. We will be getting the systems rebooted and getting the LFS podcast back up and running. And we might have some changes to do with the podcast as well. We have so much to come. Join us for the brand new series of the LFS podcast in August. Welcome back to the LFS podcast here on the final episode of this series. Series 1, of course, 13 episodes. And what a 13 episode it has been. And we're into the last segment of the series. And what a segment this is set up to be. The Premier League fixtures were released on Thursday morning, as you're watching this yesterday morning, and what a set of fixtures is to come. Of course, the newcomers, Burnley, Luton, Sheffield United, see where they're going to start their seasons. What about the champions? Where do they start? What about the top four teams? Will they have difficult start to the season, and who will have a pretty decent start to their season? Well, let's get started with the opening week then. And Manchester City will kick us off. They have been handed an immediate reunion with their former title-winning captain, Vincent Kompany, as Pep Guardiola's treble-winning team opened the new season with a Friday night trip to Burnley after the season's fixtures were revealed. His side will face a baptism of fire at Turf Moor on 11th of August against the best team in Europe, Vincent Kompany this is, who are still celebrating a historic treble of the Premier League, FA Cup and Champions League. Well, it's also some key stories. Chelsea's new head coach, Mauricio Pochettino, has also been handed a tough start hosting Liverpool in a mouth-watering clash of two teams seeking a return to the top four after missing out last season. And Jurgen Klopp's men travel to Stamford Bridge on Sunday, the 13th of August, with a 4:30 kickoff. Well, earlier that day, another new manager faces a challenging Premier League debut as Ange Postecoglou's Tottenham Hotspur make the short trip across London to Brentford, who performed well against the traditional Big Six clubs last season and picked up 4 points against Spurs. Well, Saturday's Premier League action kicks off at the Emirates, where Arsenal look for revenge against the team who ended their title dreams last season. The Gunners' 1-0 defeat at Nottingham Forest in May was their final nail in the coffin of their unlikely title challenge, confirming Man City as champions. The other two promoted sides other than Burnley are also in action on the Saturday, the 12th of August, as Sheffield United host Crystal Palace, while Luton Town's first match in the Premier League will be a tough trip to high-flying Brighton and Hove Albion, who finished a record-high 6th under Roberto De Zerbi. Two of the most improved sides of last season meet in Saturday's final match. The ambitions of Aston Villa, whom Unai Emery lifted from relegation concern to a 7th place finish, will be tested at Newcastle, who finished in the top 4 for the first time in 20 years last season. Before then, Bournemouth will host West Ham, as two teams who escaped the relegation battle late in the season look to start their campaign on a positive note. And the opening weekend concludes on Monday evening, with Manchester United hosting Wolves and look to avoid back-to-back opening weekend losses after being beaten by Brighton last season. That is Manchester United, by the way. So, an abundance of storylines for the new Premier League season. Of course, Vincent Kompany against his old club, a club that he captained towards a lot of trophies over the previous few years. Arsenal getting revenge against Forest. Newcomers Luton have Brighton away. Tough test for anyone. Newcastle Villa, two massively improved sides, face off at St James's. A mouth-watering Sunday as Ange Postecoglou goes to Thomas Frank's at home, which Brentford have a good record against big teams. Chelsea, Liverpool, what a clash that is to start the season for both of those teams who massively, or both, really underperformed last season. And of course, Manchester United and Wolves is a great tie under the lights, Old Trafford, to finish off match day 1. What an incredible opening weekend that is set to be. Incredible. To the more or less halfway point of the season, and we will have a normal season this season. We won't have a break up in the middle of the season. We will have a natural season this season, and we will have normal Boxing Day fixtures. Here they are, a packed festive period of 3 match weeks in just over a week, which will start on Saturday the 23rd of December with Liverpool-Arsenal, the outstanding match on that one. But to Boxing Day first, Arsenal will host West Ham on Boxing Day for the second year running, while Chelsea are at home to Palace in another London derby. Brighton will face Spurs at home, while Manchester United face Aston Villa. Will also be an appealing one. And promoted pair Sheffield United again and Luton go head to head. That is a setup for the books. A few interesting ones. Everton Man City is also one that has caught my eye in there amongst those types of games. Everton Man City, of course, has caused a lot of controversy over the years, and a Boxing Day fixtures between those two teams will be incredible. Also, the festive fixtures, just to take you through, the final day and match week of 2023 starts on the 30th of December. Liverpool v Newcastle is a really exciting matchup. That is on the New Year's weekends as well. And of course, it is massive that those teams over the festive period, of course, it's always jam-packed in the festive period, but you will have at least a 48-hour break between playing games in the festive period, so not to worry. It's going to be absolutely thriving this season for the festive period, and we're going to finish with the way the Premier League will finish next season. The final day at see what that could mean. Well, the final round of matches takes place on Sunday the 19th of May, with all 10 matches kicking off at 4 p.m, as of course is standard. Brighton vs Manchester United could be a match that determines the European ambitions of both teams. Meanwhile, Everton fans, we hope they're not fighting for safety on the final day again, as they were last season, as they head to Arsenal, who beat them 5-1 in the same fixture on the final day in the 2021-22 season. Interesting enough. Burnley, Sheffield United and Luton are each at home for their final match, as they look to replicate the feats of last season's 3 promoted clubs, who all managed to avoid relegation for only the 4th time in the Premier League's history. As Sheffield United host Spurs, what a tough test that will be. Luton host Fulham and Burnley host Nottingham Forest. Of course, Fulham and Nottingham Forest were 2 of the previous promoted teams from last season. And also one for fans to kind of keep their eye on, maybe title challengers. Man City will be home on the final day of the season if they're looking to get the title. If Liverpool are going to be back up there, they will be at home at Anfield on the final day. Remember, Liverpool against Wolves was the final day fixture when Liverpool lost the Premier League title on the final day. Not last season, the season before that, the 21-22 season. And if Arsenal are going to do that, they will have the home fixture against Everton as well. So a couple of title contenders in there we will see, but 3 of them are at home. That is set to be fascinating. Well, those are the key Premier League fixtures, and that is the final episode of the LFS podcast for this series. Just before we go, I would like to tell you about our social media pages. Over the summer, we will be keeping up to date on social media, Twitter, Instagram and TikTok at LFStreams2. Go follow us on all of those so you don't miss anything as LFS returns for the brand new season. On Monday, the 17th of July, we will have jam-packed action all the way through the pre-season and also ahead of the brand new season. And don't forget, a new series of the LFS podcast. That's this August on the LFS podcast. We will have more information on what the exact date of the new series will be. But all we can reveal to you and I is that it will be in August at some point. Just before we go, I would, of course, like to thank each and every one of you who have followed the LFS podcast this series. An incredible 13 weeks of podcasting, 20, 30-minute episodes, chatting through the big topics of the week, going through the big stories of the week, some transfer updates in there as well, and a lot of managerial sackings as well. It has been an absolute blast this season, an incredible, incredible joy, and I hope that you can stay with us and look forward to the brand new season of the LFS podcast, which will be coming your way in August. But for now, thank you very much for listening, and I'll be back in the new season. See you then. Have a good summer. Bye-bye.